I always believed I knew my wife's heart. For years, I clung to the notion that no matter how chaotic life got, we had each other's backs. When Rebecca and I first met, we were both undergrads at a bustling university, forging our futures in different fields, she in sociology, I in engineering. The moment I saw her, hair pulled back, eyes bright with curiosity as she flipped through textbooks in the campus library, I felt a tug of connection I couldn't explain. I remember working up the nerve to ask if she needed help finding a particular volume. She blushed, nodded, and showed me a slip of paper with a call number. That simple, ordinary moment somehow crackled with possibility. By the time we left the library, we'd made plans to get coffee the next day. We spent 3 hours chatting in a small cafe near campus, losing track of time, stepping into an ease of conversation I had never experienced with anyone else. She laughed at my jokes, even the awkward ones, and told me about her dream of helping underprivileged communities. I was hooked. Our relationship grew from that spark of curiosity into something deeply comforting and real. We found in each other a partner who understood the subtle anxieties and hopes we carried. She'd crash in my dorm on nights we stayed up too late watching obscure documentaries on social justice or silly comedies that had us giggling until we collapsed in each other's arms. I'd walk her to her part-time job at a bookstore, sneaking an arm around her waist at red lights, ignoring the playful eye roll from her. We shared an innocent optimism about life after graduation. We talked about traveling the world, volunteering abroad, or maybe starting a small nonprofit together. It all felt so possible. By the time we graduated, we were inseparable, renting a tiny apartment with chipped paint and questionable heating but an undeniable sense of coziness. We pieced together mismatched furniture, turned the living room into a shared study, and learned to cook simple meals that filled the air with the aroma of love and contentment. We were young, broke, but wholeheartedly devoted. That was the year I asked her to marry me. We had no money for a big ring or an elaborate proposal, but I bought a modest band, and on a rainy afternoon, we walked through the city until we found a quiet bench near the river. I got down on one knee, hands shaking, voice cracking, and told her she made me want to be a better person every day. She cried, nodded, said yes before I finished my speech. We kissed in the drizzle, ignoring the curious onlookers, and I felt a thrilling certainty that no obstacle could topple our union. The wedding was small but joyful, held in my parents' backyard. Strings of white lights glowed in the early evening, and the laughter of our close friends and family filled the air. Her father teared up as he walked her down the makeshift aisle, stepping over patches of grass we'd carefully trimmed. The ceremony was short, the vows heartfelt. I promised to stand by her, protect her, support her dreams, and she promised to keep my heart safe, to grow with me, to never let the world dull our shared light. As we slid rings onto each other's fingers, the guests cheered and whistled, and in that moment, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that this bond we'd forged was unbreakable. The first few years of marriage reinforced that sense of security. I found a decent engineering job, and Rebecca used her sociology background to land a position at a nonprofit, helping families in crisis. Though the work was emotionally draining, she told me it gave her purpose. On tough days, she'd cry into my shoulder, confessing how powerless she felt in the face of systemic problems. We'd talk for hours, strategizing ways she could find hope in small victories, children who found stable homes, individuals who found mental health resources. She'd eventually smile, say something about feeling lucky to have me as her anchor. In turn, I leaned on her whenever my own career pressures piled up. She never once seemed to doubt our joint capacity to face anything life threw at us. But as the years passed, responsibilities increased. We moved into a bigger rental, then decided to buy a small house in a suburban neighborhood, enticed by the idea of planting roots. Mortgage, bills, the endless tasks of adulthood, none of it seemed insurmountable with her by my side. However, I started to notice a creeping distance between us. She became more consumed with her job, often working late or bringing paperwork home. Her face would tense at times I tried to bring up mundane chores or weekend plans. I wrote it off as stress. After all, her line of work was intense. I tried to be supportive, cooking dinners on nights she got stuck at the office, or surprising her with a weekend getaway once in a while. Sometimes I succeeded in lifting her mood, other times she brushed off my attempts, apologizing but claiming exhaustion. We'd laugh it off, blaming the hamster wheel of adult life. Looking back, I can see the subtle warning signs that something had changed. She'd set her phone face down on the table more often, and I'd glimpse her turning away to answer texts. She started attending more work gatherings or late-night strategy sessions, which I always believed were legitimate. After all, it wasn't unusual for nonprofits to host after-hours fundraising or to meet with donors. Maybe I should have been suspicious the night I volunteered to drive her to a late dinner with a potential benefactor, and she told me not to bother, that a coworker was picking her up. Something in her expression seemed uneasy. But I trusted her. If she was uneasy, I assumed it was job-related, not personal. I kissed her goodbye and told her to have a good meeting. Everything changed on a Saturday afternoon, a day that started as normally as any other. I'd gone for a morning run, grabbed groceries, and came home to find a note from Rebecca that she'd gone for a quick coffee with a friend from work and might do some shopping afterward. The house was quiet, and I decided to take the opportunity to tackle a few chores. By noon, she still hadn't returned. I texted, got no response, so I assumed she was busy. Around 3, I realized I'd left an important folder in my office that I needed to review for a Monday presentation. I hopped in my car and drove out, fully expecting to be back in half an hour. On the way to the office, I remembered a new blueprint that might also be useful, which was at a colleague's place. I detoured to pick it up. The errands took a bit longer than expected, so by the time I was done, it was close to 6 in the evening. I decided to call and see if Rebecca was home, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Slightly irritated by the silence, but not overly worried, I drove back to our house. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was parked. Relief trickled through me, maybe she'd just lost track of time or her battery died. As I climbed out of my car, I had the oddest sense that something was off. The curtains in our living room were drawn, which was unusual during daylight. My chest tightened with a strange nervousness, but I shook it off, entering the house quietly. Inside, the lights were off except for a dim lamp in the living room. It was silent, no sign of her rummaging around or music playing like she usually did. I called her name. No answer. I stepped further in, noticing her shoes by the door. Another pair of shoes I didn't recognize sat beside them, brown loafers, definitely not mine. My heart thumped. We occasionally had friends over, but she usually let me know if a guest was coming. I stared at those shoes, the creeping sense of dread intensifying. Trying to be rational, I told myself it could be a coworker, maybe someone who needed help, but the hush in the house suggested something else. My breath felt shaky as I moved toward the hallway leading to our bedroom. As I approached the closed bedroom door, I heard muffled voices, Rebecca's voice, and a man's. My stomach twisted, hot and nauseous. I stood there for a moment, unable to move or think. Then, driven by adrenaline, I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me felt like a waking nightmare. Rebecca and a man I'd never seen were tangled on our bed, the sheets askew. They froze, wide-eyed, as though time itself had cracked. My mind short-circuited, struggling to process the fact that this was real, that my wife was with someone else in our own home, on our own bed. For a second, none of us moved. Then the man scrambled up, swearing under his breath, grabbing for his clothes. Rebecca's face went ashen. She pulled the sheet around herself, stammering, "My God, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." Her words barely registered over the roar in my ears. My world spun. Part of me wanted to lunge at him, to demand how dare he violate my home, my marriage. Another part felt an overwhelming numbness, as though I'd stepped out of my body. Finally, I forced myself to speak, voice rough. "Get out," I told him. He started to stutter an apology, but I pointed to the door, repeating, "Get out, or so help me." I didn't finish the sentence. He snatched up his clothes, shooting a panicked look at Rebecca, who was now crying quietly. Without another word, he shoved past me, barefoot, grabbing those damn loafers by the door. Within moments, he was gone, leaving me alone with my wife in the suffocating silence. My limbs felt like lead as I turned back to look at her. She remained on the bed, sheet clutched to her chest, tears streaming. "Please," she begged, "this was a mistake. I'm so sorry." I stared, my own tears burning behind my eyes, though I refused to let them fall. "A mistake?" I repeated in a hollow voice. "That's what you call it?" She looked so small, so devastated, but in that instant, all I felt was betrayal and fury. Her mouth trembled as she tried to explain, but no words came. I was trembling, physically shaking from the shock and the adrenaline. I barked, "Get dressed," then turned on my heel, storming out of the room, letting the bedroom door slam behind me. In the living room, I stood there, hands in my hair, heart racing. The urge to run, to scream, to smash something was overwhelming. That mental image of her with him felt like a searing brand on my mind. For years, I had trusted her, believed in her goodness, never suspecting she could break us in such a brutal way. I didn't know how much time passed before she emerged, dressed in a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, eyes puffy from crying. She approached me slowly, like I was a wounded animal that might lash out. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice thick. It happened so fast, I never meant to do this. I never thought I." My rage snapped. "Never meant to do this?" "It clearly didn't happen by accident," I spat, my voice trembling with hurt. "You were in our bed, Rebecca." "Our bed?" This wasn't some random slip. It took planning, intent, lying. How long has this been going on?" She winced, tears falling. "Only a couple of times," she admitted. "We started talking at some work event, things got out of hand. It was new, exciting, but I swear I didn't. I never wanted to hurt you." The words stung like needles. "A couple of times?" The realization that it wasn't just a singular moment of weakness, but repeated betrayal, shattered me further. "Why?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Am I not enough for you? Was our marriage so worthless to you that you'd throw it away for a cheap thrill?" She shook her head, sobbing. "No, I love you. I was just, I don't know, I felt disconnected, lonely. My job, life, everything was spinning. And then he was there, paying attention. It was a mistake, I swear. I was going to end it." Hearing her blame some nebulous feeling of loneliness for what I'd just witnessed ignited me. I paced the room, struggling to contain the surge of emotions. My eyes stung with unshed tears as I tried to imagine all the nights I was home, waiting for her, thinking she was out late with coworkers, only to realize she was with him. The sense of betrayal crushed me. Eventually, I sank onto the sofa, pressing the heels of my hands to my eyes. She sat across from me on the floor, her voice choking on apologies. The anger in me waged war with heartbreak, each breath a fresh agony. You need to leave," I said, hardly recognizing my own voice. She froze. "What?" "Go stay with someone else," I repeated, trembling. "I can't look at you right now, can't sleep in the same house. I need space to figure out anything." She started to protest, to say it was her house too, but her voice died in her throat when she saw my expression. Quietly, through tears, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "If that's what you need, I'll go. But can we talk? Tomorrow, or soon? Please, let me try to make this right. She looked so desperate, so lost, but the memory of what I'd seen only minutes before clung to me like a venomous brand. I don't know, I said, voice cracking. Just go. She stood, looking like she might reach out to me, but decided against it. I sat there as she hurriedly threw clothes into an overnight bag, tears dripping down her cheeks, muttering repeated apologies that I refused to respond to. Within half an hour, she was gone, leaving me alone in a house that felt defiled. The silence was deafening, the ring on my finger suddenly unbearably heavy. My mind reeled, replaying the sight of them, the shock on their faces, my wife's sobbing explanations. I tried to find some sense of calm, but all I had was the raw pain gnawing at every corner of my mind. That night, I barely slept. I wandered from room to room, rummaged for a stiff drink in the kitchen, ended up just staring at the glass. Sometimes I cried, silent tears that burned my cheeks. Sometimes I paced, fists clenched, imagining confronting that man who had the audacity to step into my home, my marriage. I wondered who he was, what he gave her that I didn't. The realization that my wife chose to betray me was a deeper wound than I'd ever known possible. I wrestled with a twisted sense of inadequacy and anger, broken by confusion over how we'd gotten here. Weren't we that couple everyone admired for our closeness? By morning, I felt hollowed out, but no less furious. My phone buzzed with messages from Rebecca, each one a plea for forgiveness, an offer to meet somewhere neutral to talk. I ignored them, though part of me ached to see if she had any explanation that could make sense of the madness. Instead, I spent the day calling in sick to work, trying to gather my thoughts. I texted a close friend, Adrian, telling him I had an emergency and needed to crash at his place for a few days. He called immediately, concerned, but I couldn't bring myself to detail the story over the phone. I just said I'd fill him in when I got there. He said he'd make space, no questions asked. Grateful, I packed a small bag and left the house that afternoon, unable to bear the sight of our bed, or the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. Staying with Adrian was a temporary refuge. I told him everything, from discovering the shoes in the hallway to walking in on them, to her tearful claim it was a mistake. He listened, his face stricken, occasionally letting out curses on my behalf. "Man," he said softly, "I can't believe it. You guys seemed so stable. I'm so sorry, I can't imagine what you're going through." I nodded numbly. He offered me a beer, and we spent hours just talking in circles. The pain didn't diminish, but it felt less suffocating to have someone sharing it with me. Rebecca kept texting. Some of her messages were paragraphs, detailing how she'd ended things with that guy, how she'd messed up, how it never meant anything compared to what we had. She claimed she was racked with guilt, ready to do anything to fix what she'd destroyed. She begged me to meet, to let her see me face to face, to talk about what led her to such a dark decision. She said she loved me, that she was terrified of losing me forever. At times, I wanted to hurl my phone against the wall. Other times, I felt a flicker of longing for our old connection. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to see if there was a path forward. Another part insisted that I owed her nothing, that maybe we were done. On the third day after the affair came to light, I caved to my own swirling curiosity and anger. I agreed to meet her at a small park near Adrian's apartment. I arrived first, heart pounding, scanning the families and joggers around me, feeling alien in my own skin. When she showed up, she looked haggard, eyes puffy, hair disheveled, as if she hadn't slept. She approached slowly. I stayed seated on a bench, not inviting her to sit, but she did anyway, leaving a few feet between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just stared at the grass. Finally, she broke the silence. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, voice trembling. "I know you might not believe me, but I love you more than anything. It was a stupid, selfish choice." I felt so numb, so lost at work. He showed me attention, flattered me, and I was weak. It never should have gone beyond a moment. She paused, swallowing. But it did, and I take full responsibility. You're right to hate me. I hate myself for it. My hands were clenched in my lap. So why do it again? I asked, voice raw. If you claim you hated it so much, you had a second time, maybe more. You clearly had more than one chance to stop. She winced, tears brimming. I know, she whispered. After the first time, I felt immense guilt, but also, a messed up sense of relief from the monotony. That's no excuse, but it's the truth. Then the second time happened, and by then, I realized what a disaster I was creating. I tried to end it with him, but I was too cowardly to confess to you. I thought I could bury it, that you'd never find out. But you did, and I can't undo it. I looked away, tears threatening to overwhelm me. You said it was a mistake, but it's more like a series of choices. You had a million opportunities not to break us. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're right. It was a series of awful decisions. I can't change that, but I want to fight for us if you'll let me. I'll do anything, counseling, changing jobs, giving you all the space you need, whatever it takes. Just, please, don't let this define the end of us. We've had so much love, so many dreams. I can't lose that because I was an idiot. A swirl of anger and sorrow churned in me. My mind flashed through memories, our wedding day, lazy Sunday mornings, supportive words when I was stressed. Part of me wanted to lash out, tell her she already lost me. Another part felt the old love we shared, fighting to be acknowledged. I forced myself to keep a level voice. I'm not sure I can forgive you, I said, tears biting my eyes. Or even trust you again. How do I know this won't happen the next time you feel bored or lonely? She inhaled shakily. I understand the doubt. All I can do is show you, day by day, that I'm committed. I'll be transparent about my schedule, my phone, everything. I'll never so much as text him again. I blocked him. I'm already looking for another job. I need a chance to prove I can be the woman you married. We talked for over an hour, me demanding answers to how long, how she kept it secret, who else knew. She answered each question in a trembling voice, never trying to deflect blame. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me insight into her mindset, depression, dissatisfaction, all culminating in an escapist fling that turned real. Finally, exhausted, I stood up. She rose too, tears still wet on her face. So what now? She asked, voice wavering. I looked at her, memories colliding with heartbreak in my chest. I need time, I said softly. I can't say we'll fix this, but I won't slam the door yet. I need to think. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. Okay. I'll respect whatever you decide. I'm so sorry. Without another word, I turned and walked away, the ache in my chest nearly crippling. She didn't follow. Back at Adrian's, I sunk into a despair that felt infinite. But bit by bit, I recognized I had two choices, either move on from her, or try to salvage the marriage through therapy, healing, and an uncertain future. Adrian listened, providing the devil's advocate for both paths, how I might never trust her again if we stayed together, how leaving her might lead to regrets about giving up on something once so precious. Over the next couple of weeks, I met Rebecca a few more times in neutral places, a coffee shop, a library lounge. We hashed out more details, sometimes quietly, sometimes with tears. She repeated that she'd do anything I needed to start rebuilding trust, that she regretted her actions. She had applied to new jobs, cut off contact with the affair partner, even told some close friends about her mistake so they'd understand if they heard rumors. Eventually, I conceded to attend couples counseling. I didn't want to be naive, but I also felt that 5 years of marriage, and the deep bond we once shared, deserved a real shot at repair. The counselor's office became our battleground for honesty, tears, and at times furious arguments. I spilled out my anger, describing in excruciating detail the scene I walked into, how I felt worthless, humiliated, how the memory haunted me. Rebecca sobbed as she told me about her mental health struggles, how she felt overshadowed by my career success, how she tried to compensate by losing herself in her work, and how a coworker's attention caught her off guard at a vulnerable time. She never once tried to justify her actions, she said it was always her fault for crossing the line. Week by week, therapy forced us to confront the chasms that had opened between us. I saw flickers of the woman I fell in love with during those sessions. The sincerity in her eyes, the heartbreak in her voice, the unwavering determination to make amends. Slowly, a part of me thawed enough to consider a future together. That didn't mean the pain vanished. Even as we made some progress, triggers lurked everywhere. A random text on her phone, the mention of staying late at work, or even a love scene on TV could send me spiraling into suspicion or sorrow. Each time, she'd hold my hand, reassure me, or let me rage if that's what I needed. She made no excuses, just apologized for the ripples of hurt she unleashed. Months passed in this delicate process. She found a new job at a different nonprofit. We put the house up for sale, an extreme choice, but we wanted a fresh start without the memory of that bed, that betrayal. We planned to move into a new apartment if we decided to remain together. The ultimate question still loomed: could I truly forgive her and trust her again? Some days I was convinced the answer was no, that I'd always be looking over my shoulder. Other days, I felt a fragile hope that, with time, we could build something new from the ashes. Rebecca never gave up. She wrote me letters detailing how she remembered our past joys, how she believed in our ability to overcome even this darkest moment. She made small gestures, leaving me heartfelt notes, planning activities that let us reconnect without daily stress. She encouraged me to see a therapist on my own, which I did, to process the betrayal from my perspective. Little by little, I found that I could breathe around her without the memory clawing at my chest. I could see her tears not just as a manipulative tool, but as genuine regret for hurting someone she still loved. Eventually, we reached a turning point. The counselor suggested a trial reset. We'd rent a new place together, but keep the option of separate sleeping arrangements if needed. We agreed, though I was terrified it might fail. We found a small apartment in a neighborhood we'd never lived in, boxes stacked everywhere. On moving day, I remember pausing at the front door with her. She looked at me, eyes brimming with a mix of apology and hope, and said, "Thank you for giving us a chance." I nodded, hugging a box of kitchen utensils to my chest, unsure of my own feelings. But once the new apartment was set up, with fresh walls and no memories of that horrific day, a cautious relief settled in. It was like we'd turned a page, though the old chapter still echoed. Our next few therapy sessions focused on practical steps for rebuilding trust, open phone policies, honest communication about schedules, a vow to discuss any emotional distance before it festered. I agreed, though I reminded her I'd be suspicious at times. That was part of the fallout. She understood, or at least tried to. Whenever suspicion flared, I tried not to lash out but calmly told her I was triggered, and she'd calmly reassure me about where she was, who she was with. Over time, those incidents lessened, but it was a slow, grinding process. Some nights, I'd have nightmares about walking in on them again, and she'd wake me from my tossing and turning, hold me close, tears in her eyes, whispering how sorry she was. Eventually, we found a new kind of closeness. More raw, more open about our flaws. The betrayal left scars on both of us, but we discovered a deeper honesty in the aftermath. She swore never to hide her struggles again, to come to me if she felt lonely or depressed instead of seeking solace elsewhere. I, in turn, recognized areas where I might have emotionally neglected her without meaning to. None of that excused her actions, but understanding that no relationship is bulletproof if communication fails gave me a measure of acceptance. A year after the day I walked in on them, I look at Rebecca and see both the woman who shattered my heart and the woman who's worked tirelessly to mend it. Sometimes the memories stab me, but they no longer dominate my every waking moment. We continue therapy, keep each other accountable, and try to create new memories that might overshadow the old. Our marriage is far from perfect, but it's breathing, evolving. She's never again called it a mistake, she's called it a betrayal, a disaster, a choice she'll regret forever. That might be the best sign of our progress, that she no longer tries to minimize it. She owns the gravity of what she did. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a singular event but a daily practice. Some days I fail at it, snapping at her or spiraling into dark thoughts. Some days, we talk softly about the future, maybe we'll travel again, or rescue a dog, or volunteer together. Each talk reaffirms that we're choosing to fight for something we once believed unbreakable. We know now it can indeed break, but it doesn't have to remain broken if we're willing to put in the work. People sometimes ask me if I should have left her. I don't have a neat answer. Part of me wonders if a clean break would have spared me the months of anguish. Another part is grateful that I stayed, because I see the genuine remorse in her and the renewed love we share. We both changed drastically. We had to. And as time marches on, we remain committed to building a relationship with stronger foundations, ones that can weather the storms of doubt. The fear of another betrayal still lurks, but so does the memory of the joy we found in each other's arms. When I remember the day I walked in and saw them, my chest tightens. That image might never leave my mind. But I also remember the day I saw her for the first time in the library, the day she became my wife under the glow of backyard lights, and the thousand little instances when we were inseparable. Those moments matter too. They remind me that this marriage, battered as it is, holds a depth worth fighting for. And so, I keep going. We both keep going, one painful, hopeful step at a time.